Hello, my name is Alex. This is my YouTube channel. I'm on the autism spectrum. Today's video is about the Chronicles of Narnia. Now, I have done a few videos on my special interests on this channel. I did one about anime, I did one about Star Wars as well. Now, this one is about my journey into the Chronicles of Narnia as an autistic person. I hope you do enjoy this video, and I'd like to introduce you to someone as well. Hello, hello, hello. Here is my dog, Odysseus, or family dog. Isn't he cute? Now, my main introduction to the Chronicles of Narnia series was actually through the BBC Narnia series here. Now, it wasn't DVD that I originally watched it on, of course, it was VHS. It was back in those days. But as a child, I absolutely adored the BBC Narnia series. It has 3 seasons, but it adapts 4 books. The first season adapts The Lion, the Witch and the Wardrobe. The second season adapts both Prince Caspian and The Voyage of the Dawn Treader. And the third season adapts The Silver Chair. Which is kind of why The Voyage of the Dawn Treader and Prince Caspian are basically shorter stories in BBC form than the other 2 are, which are very, very long. It's because those 2 are actually in 1 season. Now, as a child, I absolutely adored this series, and I thought it was very, it really just made me super hooked. However, some people, though, I remember I had some family members that thought it was really rubbish, but I didn't understand why. I thought it was brilliant. And also, it was this series in particular of the Chronicles of Narnia helped me to actually understand certain things better. Like before then, through my early childhood, I really struggled to understand a lot of concepts, like things that I couldn't see. I struggled to understand that the world was round. I struggled to believe that there were people in other countries or that other countries existed. And I also didn't really believe the Middle Ages ever happened either. I think I also struggled to really believe that I would ever grow up as well, in all honesty. Like, as far as I was concerned, I was a child and it was hard for me to really understand, oh, one day I'll become an adult. Unless, of course, I die before then, which I didn't, I haven't. There's a reason why it helped me to understand concepts of things I hadn't seen. It's because it also helped me to understand the concept of God. I struggled to believe in God because I couldn't see God. Whereas the Chronicles of Narnia, basically it helped me to understand that Aslan is like God. He's almost a symbol of God, or the Lord Jesus Christ. And this helped me to actually, because I'd seen Narnia, and there were certain story elements that do kind of wrap around what happened around the story of the Bible. This really helped me to actually understand and grasp the concept of God much better. And it was through this that helped me to come to know the Lord. But I'm not going to go into too much about that in this video. If you want to know my full testimony, I can probably put a link to that in YouTube. I can probably put a link to my testimony in the description for this video. But I'm not going to be talking about that too much now. Okay, so the Chronicles of Narnia. Yeah, this series I absolutely loved as a child. However, a lot of you are probably curious about what I think of the newer ones, or maybe you're not curious, but you might be interested in knowing what I think of the, newer ones. They're not exactly new anymore. The one from 2005, which came out 20 years ago now. This film, The Lion, the Witch and the Wardrobe, came out in 2005. And ever since I saw this in the cinema, or I saw this trailers of it even, I got very, very excited that a new Narnia film was coming out. It came out it was released when I was 12 years old in December. And I was super, super pumped to see a new Lion, the Witch and the Wardrobe film. And I was actually really, really excited to actually see, because this film, I remember being amazed when I saw that this film actually had more real looking beavers. Whereas in the BBC series, the Mr. and Mrs. Beaver, they're people in costumes. They're not real beavers. I mean, I'm not saying they're real beavers in this either. They're computer generated, but they look at least more like beavers. Whereas in this one, they're obviously people in costumes. And I didn't think anything of this. I was just used to it, and accepted the fact that they were people in costumes. But it still felt. But I was just very, very excited to actually see something which actually had real beavers, and not just that, but Aslan. In this one, Aslan was an animatronic. Whereas in this, he looks more like a real lion. And I remember being so excited to actually see it. And when I did see it in the cinema, it did not disappoint me. I really, really enjoyed this film. And it got to the point where I basically stopped enjoying this original BBC Lion, the Witch and the Wardrobe, because it just wasn't as good to me at that point, and it kind of got to the point where I started to actually think this was pretty rubbish, because it was just so much, it was so dated, like the effects did not hold up in the slightest, and it also was much slower paced too, and it also wasn't that well acted either through some of the cast, so I started to actually kind of distance myself from this. Well, I decided to rewatch these more recently, and honestly, they've kind of grown on me a little bit again. Like, I am more nostalgic for these versions now than I was for quite a while. I still think that they can be very hard to take seriously because they are extremely dated. But there is a certain charm to them at the same time, and they are also extremely accurate to the books. Like, if you want very, very accurate stories, these are the ones to go for. When I was a child, though, I absolutely loved. I actually enjoyed the BBC White Witch more than the newer White Witch, the World Media White Witch, because I thought the BBC one was much scarier and extreme, and whereas the new one was kind of calmer and not really scary from my perspective. However, as an adult, I've kind of almost changed my mind on that a little bit. I think the White Witch in this version is kind of almost, well, yeah, she's not super scary. She does have a moments where she can be pretty intimidating. And I kind of think it does make sense for her not to be super scary when she's kind of meant to be charming Edmund and kind of like trying to get him on her side. Whereas in the BBC one, she's so obviously evil right from the start. It's like, how did Edmund ever think that she was trustworthy? Because she's so obviously evil. And as well as this, in the BBC one too, she is also... don't get me wrong, the White Witch is very entertaining in this one. Like, if you want something that's very, like, just an over-the-top performance, you're going to have a blast with this one. But it is very much over-the-top, and the acting is very over-the-top and kind of cheesy, in all honesty. It's like, but it is very entertaining, for sure. Like, if you want to have a blast watching a really over-the-top White Witch, this is definitely one to check out. Yeah, overall, I think there is an appeal to this BBC version. Like, it is more faithful to the book. So, there is that. At the same time, though, like, there's certainly scenes that are kind of almost so bad they're funny at this point. For example, like, when Aslan's roar is, like, not intimidating in the slightest. It's such a unfrightening roar, but the White Witch is all terrified and runs away, and it's like, it's so hard to take seriously. It's so funny. And in the battles, a lot of the creatures were either people in costumes or they're cartoons. And when it comes to the wolves, they would switch between these wolf guys, people in costumes, and actual, like, dogs. And they would keep switching between them. Like, whenever the dog would speak, the wolf would speak, they'd switch to a person in a costume. And it kind of did make it a little bit... it kind of made it a bit silly, in all honesty. So that was The Lion, the Witch and the Wardrobe. Prince Caspian was the second one. And that one I really... As a child, I was surprised at how short it was. Because The Lion, the Witch and the Wardrobe was really, really long, like almost 3 hours long. But Prince Caspian was very short, like an hour long. Even just below an hour. And I learned more recently that the reason why that is because it was filmed with The Voyage of the Dawn Treader. Those are one season instead of two. But yeah, overall I did like Prince Caspian as well. Some good performances, like Trumpkin, the actor for Trumpkin did a good job. I think he's the same actor that plays the White Witch's dwarf in The Lion, the Witch and the Wardrobe, actually. An interesting fact as well, the lady who played the White Witch she plays the hag in Prince Caspian and the Lady of the Green Kirtle in The Silver Chair as well. Now, the second Prince Caspian film, I also really, really loved when I first saw it in the cinema. And I still think this is a really solid film as well, along with The Lion, the Witch and the Wardrobe. However, it's not a very accurate adaptation of the book. It does make a lot of changes. It still gets the spirit of the book and it gets what the book is about. So it's not like a drastic change, but it does kind of change things around a bit. Quite a lot. But I do think the book would be a difficult book to adapt if you're going to be completely faithful, so I do understand that. Some changes, though, I didn't care for. I wasn't a big fan of how they added the romance between Caspian and Susan. It wasn't needed. I think that... What else? Some of Aslan's dialogue was changed to the point where it just didn't have the same meaning as it did in the original book. So, not a fan of that. But overall, definitely a solid sequel, and the BBC one wasn't bad either. Voyage of the Dawn Treader was the third one. Now, honestly, when it comes to the BBC Voyage of the Dawn Treader, I always found that probably my least favourite, because it felt, even though it was the second shortest, it felt like the slowest pace. It felt very slow moving. However, there were still good stuff in it, like the dragon, the effect for the dragon. It wasn't convincing, it didn't look real, but the animatronic, for what they had, was pretty good. Like, it was better than, say, the people in costumes. And the animatronic for the sea serpent as well also wasn't bad, honestly, for its time. And I will also give credit to Aslan in all of the BBC series. Actually was a pretty good effect, in fairness. Like, it doesn't really look like a lion, but it doesn't look like a real lion, but it still looks good, if you know what I'm saying. Like, it looks like a good effort, a good imitation of a real lion. It's not really, I don't think you'd be intimidated if you saw that lion, but it looks more convincing than, say, a person in a lion costume, which is what they could have easily done. So I actually think that, you know, props to them for doing the lion animatronic. It does look good. Now, the Walden Media Voyage of the Dawn Treader, this was the third of the newer films. Now, this one is definitely my least favourite of the three. I think when I saw it in the cinema, I did really, really like it, but as time's gone by, I don't like it as much. It doesn't really have the same feel as the other two. It's a bit, I think because it's a different director, new studio, it has a very different feel. Like, the tone feels very different, the directing feels very different, and it also feels a bit more fast-paced. It doesn't have as many moments that are like the first two had moments that where it lets the characters breathe, even though it was much faster-paced than the BBC. This one is almost too fast-paced, I think, and it also makes too many changes to the book as well, I think. Like, it kind of it really does a lot of drastic changes. But I do also understand, though, that the original Voyage of the Dawn Treader book will be a difficult book to adapt to a feature film. So, you know, they do an okay job with this, all things considered. And I will also give credit to the fact that the boy who played Eustace Scrubb, Will Poulter, did a fantastic job as Eustace. He was very entertaining and really made a very irritating character he was very much supposed to be this way as well. I remember being very irritated when I found out that the White Witch was in this, that they basically added the White Witch, but it turns out that there is context behind why the White Witch is in this, and it does actually make sense in the film. Now, they didn't do a fourth of the Walden Media films, but the BBC did do a fourth one, and that was The Silver Chair. Now, to this day, this is very much easily my favourite of these BBC Narnia DVDs, without a doubt. Tom Baker did a fantastic job as Puddleglum. He really steals the show. He did such a great job with this performance, and he makes the whole show very entertaining, in all honesty. He is different from the book version in the sense that they played up the scaredy cat. They kind of did make him more of a scaredy cat, I think, in this version than that he was in the book, from what I remember, at least. He is still always expecting the worst in the book, but he isn't really. He doesn't seem so much afraid of. He doesn't really. You don't really get so much moments where he's like, "Oh no!" like he is in this version. From what I remember, at least, it's been quite a long time since I've listened to the audiobook, but they did overplay that a bit. However, they did very much get right the part that Puddleglum is always expecting the worst, but when the worst happens, he doesn't care either. Like, he's always prepared the worst, but like, he's not actually a pessimist. He's not really Eeyore. He is always expecting the worst, but when the worst comes, he doesn't care. Like, he's actually always looking on the bright side, in that sense. So, you know, this adaptation did get it pretty right, even though it did maybe play the negative part of him a little bit much, but overall, great performance from Tom Baker for this film. And believe it or not, I actually know him as Tom Baker as Puddleglum better than I do the Doctor, in all honesty, as I saw this BBC Narnia before I saw him as Doctor Who. Or saw him as the Doctor, rather. Not the character's name isn't Doctor Who. So that brings us for all of the BBC Narnias and the Walden Media films. But there is also another Narnia adaptation that I've also grown up with as well, and that's the BBC audiobooks. Now this adapted all 7 books, because you know there are 7 books of Narnia. So you've got Magician's Nephew, which Magician's Nephew is the first book chronologically, but I think it was like the 6th book written. That's Magician's Nephew, Lion, the Witch and the Wardrobe, Horse and His Boy, Prince Caspian. But yeah, The Horse and His Boy was also a mid-quill written later, even though it's like the 2nd book chronologically. It takes place like within the story of Chronicles of Narnia. Prince Caspian, The Voyage of the Dawn Treader, The Silver Chair, and finally my favourite, The Last Battle. The Last Battle and The Horse and His Boy don't have any adaptations as of yet, but those two are probably my favourite of the books. I think these BBC audio adaptations are fantastic, honestly. Probably my favourite of any adaptation of Narnia. They're pretty faithful to those original books, I think. They're dramatised audiobooks, so they have like a play cast, a cast of different people playing the characters, and they all do a really good job. Highly recommend, if you're a fan of the Chronicles of Narnia, I highly recommend you check out the BBC audiobooks of Narnia. So thank you all for watching. So this is my newest special interest video I've done, even though I've had this special interest since I was a young child. And I am thankful to Narnia because it did help me to understand things that I couldn't see, and it helped me to know God as well. Thank you all for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video. Now let me know your thoughts on the Chronicles of Narnia. What do you think of them? Which is your favourite of the adaptations? Let me know in the comments below. Take care. Goodbye for now.